Hello, and welcome to How Things Connect podcast, where we share insight and wisdom on healing, regeneration, and empowerment by integrating the heart, mind, body, and spirit on a personal and planetary level. Today, I'm very pleased and honored to have with me as my guest, Alex Ott. Alex is versed in nutritional biochemistry, space food systems, flavor science, and disease prevention. He has a PhD in biochemistry and molecular biology, as well as a BFA in product design and illustration. On top of that, he's also a very well-known mixologist, botanist, cocktail maker, and has appeared numerous times in Sex and the City and launched amazing bar and restaurant franchises such as Sushi Samba, and the man who New York Times in 2011 called a sorcerer, and what Lampoon magazine Italy calls the modern version of the Renaissance man. A scientist and a humanist at the same time, a philosopher-chemist seasoned in matters of the molecules as well as of the soul. So welcome.
Great introduction. Thank you so much for this. I know I tend to confuse people a lot. Every 10 years or so, I change my profession and then they don't know, what happened. So this is another surprising start. Obviously was in the middle of everything, but it's a calling this time. It's not just a lifestyle that is infused with income. It has a very high purpose, and for me, that's where I am now. That's where I'll always be, and hopefully, that's where my kids will be too. Once they get to learn this madness of what they call father. So, yes, I've had a very tumultuous lifestyle and life, but it all started already with family.
Tell us about how you grew up. You're from Germany.
I am a born German from a town called Braunschweig, Brunswick. It's a very famous town in Europe actually because it's very old. It has a lot of history and it has a university that I attended that is highly known to be multiple times more prestigious than what the US calls MIT, so a lot of famous mathematicians and chemists and biologists went to school there. My dad included, he became an architect, and I was helping him very early life to, make measurements already when I was 5, 6 years old, standing there with a little laser and ruler to measure out buildings in Eastern Germany to basically have my dad renovate these really, really old buildings. Sometimes they're 800 years old. Our hometown was not different. It was a town ruled by emperors and kaisers and conquerors. And one of these conquerors was called Heinrich the Lion. And everything in our hometown was about lions. And I've had a very early introduction to lions because shortly after, my parents moved me to Africa and traveled around with me quite a bit, starting in Tunisia and Algeria, and then Nigeria, and then finally East Africa, Kenya, to speak, in a little spot on the Indian Ocean called Malindi. And that's when I really got to get educated from my father, who decided to basically homeschool me most of the time, and introduced me to survival and celestial navigation, to find myself home, to be sleeping under a tree with nothing but a rifle and sort of building yourself a boma at night to protect yourself from the big cats and hyenas. So that's the sort of way that was really, really interesting in my childhood. I did also lose a lot of friends back home in Europe and in Germany, changing schools many times because I moved to a lot of different countries because of my father's profession. And it enabled me to get to know a lot of cultures, a lot of food and flavors and customs, and not only religions too, but a lot of spiritual things that, blew me away when I was really, really young. And I said, hopefully later on in life, I'll get to understand those a little more. And me being in science, being immersed in science right now makes a lot of sense because that's the residual curiosity of when I was, 5, 6 years old, from whatever my father tried to explain to me that, we are more than flesh and blood, and there's more than, just one God out there, or multiple gods that different nations and people believed in that they killed themselves over. That's something that wouldn't make sense to me ever. And I got more and more immersed in, the more scientific realms, and later on, through incidences that I shouldn't have survived, and opened up a new gateway to me to delve deeper into these things that my dad tried to teach me when I was young. And, it's always like this. You never really listen to your parents until you're at their point and say like, wow, this is what my parents have been telling me all my life, but I had to go through this for the last 40 years in order to, realize that this is the actual journey, and this is all about not having regrets later on, even if there's a lot of bad things happen to you in life. So I've had multiple interests when it comes to professions. I went to art school because, I wanted to become a painter. My dad was a really great artist, and he sort of inherited that to me. So I used my hands a lot. When I went to Parsons, I studied product design and illustration. I wanted to draw storyboards, and I wanted to be in the movie industry. And that allowed me to sort of move to Southeast Asia and travel through Australia as well, to sort of pitch my tent there in North Bondi. And then finally I went to a much more rural area in Sydney, and that's when I worked 18 hours a day on a movie called The Matrix. A lot of people still are so flabbergasted by the idea that I've worked on that film, and back then obviously we didn't know who the actors were going to be. That's why I didn't really get that excited about it, because I started there in almost like 95 in order to draw stuff from a guy I met on a beach in Sydney. His name was Jules Cook, and he was the art director. And he introduced me to the conceptual artist, Geoffrey Darrow. And he was the guy that designed all the spacecrafts in The Matrix. But I was responsible, along with a guy named Kani Kunitaki, who was a Japanese sketcher, to do the black and white inks. And so I did over 178 storyboards for these guys. And that was really cool, but nothing belonged to me. I wanted to, have my own show. I wanted to show my work. So I watched this movie, Great Expectation, with, Ethan Hawke and Gwyneth Paltrow. And that kind of like boosted me into becoming an artist. So I wanted to move to New York and, have my first one-man show, which I did. It was all about the screwed up stuff that happened to me in life, put on acrylic, and I tried to sell these things. And it was mostly about like really horrible events and plane crashes and comics that I, drew for, David Fincher's film Fight Club back then, little flight cards that they put into and stuff. So that was another career that I delved into. And then after I had a really, really toxic relationship with a French actress, I decided to, move back to New York. And a day after we split up, we basically parted ways for a while, but I really went into a different dimension, the day after, when I boarded that plane that we talked about. And that sort of changed everything in my life, because I had a different outlook on what I wanted to do in the future.
You're talking about Thai Airways Flight 261, which crashed.
Yes, and I wanted to have like a career in movie industry. I knew a ton of actors, and I was friends with a lot of them. And I always liked their lifestyle, because it was just like me, never sleeping, always working hard, and, being in the limelight of, things always in front of the camera, and back then I had a modeling career in Europe and in the US. I did some commissioned artworks for a lot of Wall Street brokers back then. Did a lot of private design, lighting design for Wesley Snipes, and Red Wing and Chambers in Brooklyn. That was like so long ago. These guys gave me my first big paychecks, where I was able to afford an apartment in the city, and then after I quit Parsons, I decided to hop into the, sort of like gastronomy business. But I've always been sort of a bartender, if you want to call that. Mixology comes more from the music industry, and everybody that knows me knows, like, I hate that word, Grandmaster Flash was the one that designed that word, mixology, so everything to DJ Flash forever, but no, I mean, you're either a guy that knows chemistry, and, I've had a degree in it, since I was fairly young. And I knew what I was doing with flavors and spirits. And I knew that these things have been invented for medicinal purposes back then, tequila to, make you happy, and bourbon to, chill you out, and gin for female complaints, So I infused these drinks into the restaurant industry in the early 2000s with a few chains. But before even that, in, 95, I opened up a even bigger menu, which became a big hotel chain, which was Buddha Bar. And that was the biggest project I've worked on when it comes to gastronomy. Sushi Samba was more like a very hip wave of, fusion restaurant that never existed before. People would stand around the line there. Peruvian, Brazilian, and Japanese, amazing food. And then after they shot Sex in the City there, it sort of went downhill for them. Too many tourists, and the quality sort of started dissipating. But it taught me a lot. I met a lot of people. I became sort of the shrink of the nightlife industry. Everybody spoke to me about their problems. And you met at least 5,000 to 6,000 people every single night that you've never even met before. A lot of them were, regulars too, but that sort of like gave me an idea of what's going on in the city. Knowing every single restaurant owner, nightclub owner, and whatnot. And if you ever worked in this industry, you know that it's super difficult,
Yes.
Get out, not only, but you take things for granted.
You said to me once something that was really interesting, is that during your experience as a bartender, you really, you're in touch with obviously the nightlife alcohol scene, and how many stories as a bartender that you hear speaking with your customers, and you really got in touch with, I think, perhaps the darker side, and also what people were really needing.
Yeah.
And what I find very interesting, and I'm wondering also, is this because of your influence from your grandmother, which you've also spoken to me about before, about bringing medicine into entertainment, into kind of how and bringing together unusual sensory experiences and unusual stories that you've actually heard and yourself gone through in those places, how that all kind of came together for you in terms of bringing together passion for healing and wellness into that scene. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, this was the main thing that I realized about the nightclub industry, because that actually made me and you're looking at these, sort of 5 posters that are behind me. This is something.
Love that lab.
Yeah, this is sort of like the embryo, if you want to, of what I'm doing right now, because the social lubricant of any metropolitan city was, going out for a drink, and most of the restaurant, or every single restaurant, pretty much, most of their income up to now was alcohol related and spirits related, and they had the wrong menus, obviously done by a guy that knew nothing about flavor chemistry or chemistry in general, how the human body works and what you're allowed to drink and what you're not allowed to drink. So I considered myself making drinks that were healthy, and a lot of people had a problem with that before, and they said, like, how can something that has alcohol in it be healthy? And I said, well, you don't have to really put 10 ounces of alcohol into your drink. So you're absolutely annihilated after one drink. And then, you go to the bathroom and you relieve yourself, and then you come back and then you crave a fatty burger or pizza. This is going out for most people, especially late night eating. But what you see around me here stems all from me overlooking a specific, as the chemist of, the nightlife industry, the people, how they would feel if you give them certain things, because first they complain about it, to you, about their problems at home, about their wives, about their children, about whatever people are talking about. And then I was able to sort of relieve that with a concoction, and not only with getting people drunk. And that was not really my thing, because I realized that keeping people there longer for 5-6 hours, them enjoying these times with their friends, that would be the real revolution of having a bar menu, because the bar menu was fairly short. There was mainly drinks that you could look at to say, like, hey, this is a drink that calms me down. This is a drink that wakes me up. This is a drink that puts me in a good mood. So I would use natural components from these muddled ingredients. And thanks to the muddle stick that we introduced in, 99, I have, carpal tunnel big time. But this was sort of my chemist tool back then to extract these essential oils and these functional ingredients out of plants, fresh plants, and sell them under a fun name. With like samba music and sexy ladies all around you and sushi and nightlife. So this is when people lined up and said like, wow, there was something that was different in this place. So we kind of multiplied that, and I started making a career out of it after one of these recruiters from a very, now the biggest US vodka brand, came into Sushi Samba and said, work for us, create our products, and now it's unbelievable what happened to this brand, because they would just listen to a guy that knew a little bit about flavor and scent, in order to influence a lot of different people. So I realized quickly that this could be this kind of business that I could make a difference in. Although first alcohol, nobody really respected me as a scientist back then, because I didn't have any reputation as a scientist. So I was able to be for hire for people to act as a formulator. And I did that for multiple spirits companies, from LVMH and Moët Hennessy to Svedka, which ultimately got me this humongous existence in the spirits industry. But I moved from place to place because I could choose who to work with, because I didn't want to do anything that had artificial flavorings in it, or any artificial colors, or any high fructose corn syrups and bad sugar. So I started making products. Back then I wouldn't be too much involved into this. It was just more like a for hire thing. And then later on I created my own products with a team of scientists from MIT and some really great marketing people. And that was the hangover prevention nutraceutical supplement beverage. After that came a chlorophyll beverage. And then I delved very, very deep into wellness and health. And I said, not so much spirits anymore, although I would do some really, really cool events due to alcohol, like the Oscars and VMAs and Grammys and Emmys and, every single award show you can think of. That was really fun, because you met even more people that you could promote this to, and then before you know it, you do very big events and you are the lead chemist sort of, and then you see the crowd that is not in a bad mood anymore and nobody's stressed out, everybody's happy and smiling.
Those are the Alex Ott experiences that
sort of the start of it, yeah.
Yeah.
The experiences, there a little more, there are a lot of sensorial aspects too, very private and custom made, because I get to know people before they even they attend the event, send out little questionnaires and biochemical handshakes in order to get to know them a little bit, and then you can surprise them once they're at the event, which makes a very big impact for those who organize everything.
And you also consulted for the likes of Taylor Swift, Amber Heard, 50 Cent, Susan Sarandon, and many of those celebrities, but actually on health and disease prevention, and natural enhancement via nutrition tips.
Yeah.
And how did you, I'm very curious as to how you went. You said, you kind of were starting to not so much focus on the alcohol scene, but then really more focusing on wellness, even though people did not know you so well on that level. Is that how you got into it? Is through these private consultations?
Story talking. Story. That's pretty much what comes with the profession of being in the nightlife industry first, and then creating a sort of a storm of information for people that they're not used to. And that came through the spirit first, where they said like, oh, I bet this cocktail's good without alcohol. I bet you can make, a health and wellness product out of it, a cosmeceutical. And that was possible. And that's how the conversation always started. And then I obviously had a little more knowledge than the average, perfumer or flavor chemist. And I said, hey, why don't you do this and this instead and invent something new? And then you can apply it to this. And then people would, pay more attention to not only what I had to or what I was able to create, but obviously what is even possible to create. And that's when public figures came, into this whole thing, because they told me about, personal things and problems and issues and health issues. And I would advise them on certain things, first just referring them, and then literally, being their R&D, customized just for their body, because you can't really compare people with each other when it comes to what they can eat or drink. It's not that probiotics help everybody, and it depends on what these probiotics include. And, it might be the wrong bacteria that you put in there that you already have too much of. So you need to get to know people first before you can make a recommendation. But when it comes to the pleasure circuitry of your brain, which is your most important organ in your body besides your heart, obviously, which is controlled by the brain as well, but also has a lot of, different cells that we didn't know before. That is something that when people respond to universal sacred herbs that have been around for thousands of years, that are microdosed, that are legal, that you can basically include into your events or beverages or elixirs, and then they turn into an actual medicine later on.
Were you exposed to that during your travels? Are those the mind-blowing experiences that you mentioned earlier with your father in those countries?
Yeah, the travel through Africa obviously explained a lot to me. Where most cosmetic products come from is Africa, like every tree is antioxidant there, from the marula to every oil that you put on the skin, and the brushes and the herbs that grow there, obviously not so powerful as the Amazonian herbs. But I was surprised that whenever I was in the deep, thick jungle, that I've learned a lot from shamans and from these people that would introduce me to new plant species. Not only, what they do, and they actually had me try it. They actually had me, show how to make this. And then whenever I did a product that, was originated out of a rainforest, I work with the native people there. It's, the mamo that you work with.
The mamo in Colombia.
You have to energetically approve of everything that you work with. You create something that is made from the specific plant. Hence, they're sacred, and they have never had any casualties in life, unlike the big pharma industry. So
it's interesting. I would love to hear more about your relationship with plants. I know in our conversations you have such a deep connection with the plant world, and starting from your grandmother who had a garden.
Was the spark of everything. She raised me because my parents were pretty busy during the day. But since I traveled a lot with them, obviously I hung out with them a lot, and my sister, did too. And at some point, we sort of like split and say like, okay, Alex is going to be the one that's going to go around the world here because he's so curious about everything. Because I grew up in the garden, from the sprout to the seed, and what to do with different cross pollinations and grafting 10 different cherry types on one tree and how to harvest them. So my grandmother, when she cooked every single day, she would have me be there and help her, from peeling potatoes to getting herbs out of the garden. And there were no signs on all these herbs. We had a huge herb garden. She just gave me a little knife and said, like, come back with this, and chives, and carrots and kohlrabi and whatever you can think of. And I had to look for a little while, but that's when I realized that everything that we survive off comes from the plant world. And if that is not there anymore, we're pretty screwed, because that's why everything is connected. And people haven't still realized that yet, that we come from this planet where everything seems to be growing for us. When we look at our systems and receptors, biologically speaking, we have receptors for every single plant out there, and every single living organism produces, tryptophan. Why is that? It's like a couple of steps away from, dimethyltryptamine or DMT, and everything is sort of makes sense if you work with plants and their frequencies and their vibrations, and what do they like. And I work a lot with frequencies with plants because they communicate with each other. They communicate underground, through the obviously fungal networks, but they also communicate with chemicals above, and they exchange chemical signals and electrical signals, and that's what fascinates me, because they are aware of themselves. And a lot of people will laugh at you if you mention these things. So a lot of scientists even, but there's a
Well,
reason.
there's a growing awareness certainly now.
There's a reason why plants, they're stationary. They can't move, they can't speak. So we have to speak for them, sort of, which I'm trying to do. And I always try to introduce people to new plants and medicinal values of these plants and, things that they can substitute. But I also know that we live in a time where this planet gets destroyed on a very rapid basis, and we lose a lot of these plants. So I'm trying to put together, just like a friend of mine does, who used to work for a very big flavor house. His name was Roman Kaiser, and he taught me a lot about molecular structures of scents and floral things and the fauna around the world and why things are so important, and the history of, there has been wars fought over some of these ingredients, fragrances and oud and sandalwoods and roses, and how much it takes in order to make a tiny, tiny little amount. We have to respect everything living around us. And I have come to respect every single tiny sprout that I encounter, because I know that this thing can turn into something that fascinates and heals and provides us with, nurture. And in order to bring that to the people and make them listen to you about plants or about bioreceptive concrete, what I'm always trying to talk about to people is to have a building that, can provide a haven for plants inside of the building material. And that's easily doable. A lot of countries do that already. And I would like to see that more in this country, and I know there's a lot of people that can realize that, entrepreneurs, but the plant world to me is the essential world in which I healed myself with, besides the vibrations that I myself can produce, or biophotons, in order to, produce healing and curing things for medicine. And I'm stressing on the curing and healing part, because this seems to be a term that is forbidden nowadays by specific people. But I have seen things, and I've cured myself of diseases that are, deadly. And I have that way sort of gotten a little spotlight from pharma industries and from independent, medicinal companies to speak publicly at, a lot of pharma talks and connection talks to how I did that. And the science sort of blew people away because they've never learned it in school, and a lot of these things that I know is self-taught. I read a lot of books. I watched a lot of documentaries in my life, and I've been there in person, and it's the same with, like, if you stand in front of the pyramid, there's no way, that slaves were building these pyramids, and there are no tombs, there were machines, but the history books have to be rewritten nowadays. And this is sort of what I'm here. I'm sort of like the almanac that comes with the medicine. It, tells people about the background information of a specific plant. And that's why people respond to this so amazingly, because they can grow it themselves. It's not complicated to do. And they can, benefit from it, and they promote it to their friends. So wherever I, go, I try to bring life with me in form of either a business card that has seeds inside that you can plant, or, I give them a plant themselves. And it's important to do that, because people are out of touch with the other living organisms that are around us, that have been here long before us, and will be here longer than, who knows.
The point that you make is so important, is how and we forget this all the time, that we're not separate from nature, and that we are part of nature. And really, a lot of the solutions we seek, especially for our health and well-being, are constantly around us, are just there if we become reconnected and more aware. And your life has been an incredible example of that, because you, in a very blessed way, you had that experience growing up, actually traveling to all these places and being taught and being exposed. And at the same time, perhaps, huge talents for you, on the other hand, is having gone through your own personal challenges in health and in wellness, and then having to kind of use yourself as an example to heal. And pulling all those different threads together. That means, biochemistry, molecular biology, and all the science, together with the ancient wisdom that you were able to learn, and actually integrate that into your manifestation through your work, through your products, which is amazing.
Yeah, well, the personal experience is probably the major key component in why I'm here. And you looking at this background instead of just, drawings or animations or whatnot, because at some point there was at multiple points that you've even met me at in life, I had some really, really tough times. And, I never wanted a family. Now I think obviously has made a better man out of me, and it taught me a lot more about life. So I was completely wrong about things. But I was also, hooked on specific substances myself when I was young and in nightlife. And due to my accident and the post-traumatic stress that I had, I was introduced by one of my best friends to a pharma, ingredient that.
Right. You're talking about the plane crash that killed 111 people that you survived.
Yes.
In Thailand.
I boarded the plane while I lived in Asia, and I switched the ticket with a Chinese guy because I needed to get home earlier. But it was an evening flight. It was very bad weather coming in, and the pilot made an error, multiple errors, and we crashed into a sort of a rubber plantation, a forest that was flooded. So half of the people burned to death and the other half drowned to death. And I was sort of in between. I was lucky to get out on one side, take a little kid with me that was a year old. And up to this point, I had no idea like how and why and how I did that in the first place. But I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and also spent a lot of time unlocking whatever might still be stuck there. And one of my best friends introduced me to a medication that would take my anxiety away, because it's inevitable that I need to get on planes in my life, on airplanes. And I was deadly scared days, weeks before clients booked flights for me. Nobody can understand.
I can imagine.
Obviously, the high blood pressure that I went through on a daily basis, and sleepless nights and nightmares and whatnot. But putting me back on an airplane is pretty much the worst thing you can do to me. And while I was on this medication, which is very, very difficult to come off of because it works with so many people so well for a specific amount of time before everything gets turned around and you get hooked on it. And later on, obviously, you need new organs in your body, and you need to be recalibrated, chemically speaking. So I was one of these people that had to apply a lot of discipline and lose a lot of habits in order to turn everything around, to create something that was just as strong for this feeling that I didn't want to have anymore, with just plant-based ingredients. And I did that. And I tried it out on myself. And in the very, very beginning, it started working really well. And the more turbulence you got, obviously, the more adrenaline you produce, and that's the strongest drug in your body. Not one, medication can help against that. So the rest has to come from your mind, and it always has to come from your mind. But it's extremely difficult when you have a lot of flashes going through there every time you get on the plane, and you have a little bump or sideways bump or a little fall and whatnot. Everything comes back, and you can't really prevent that. Even I tried that for many, many years with meditation and with breathing techniques and whatnot, but there seems to be still residual things that I cannot suppress, and that always get triggered by smells as well, which is a second factor that is really difficult to overcome when you meditate, unless you're a very, very disciplined meditator. Is the smell of coffee and kerosene, being on an airplane, being reminded of what I've smelled, 22 years ago when this whole thing happened. So that for many people is a smell of vacation and travel. For me, it's a smell of death. So, it's not only a reason why I don't drink coffee anymore, but I really do love coffee. But the smell of that molecule, all mixed with, the ethers, is something that triggers very bad memories.
Right.
Nightmares too, but I developed products for these things that I really don't have to take anymore now. So I now can go on a plane, unless it's a 15-hour flight to Tokyo or so nonstop. I still need to obviously take a few droppers and compressed pills in order to do that. But even those things have side effects on you sometimes, upset stomach or digestive problems. So you need to really, really find a way, because the lab-made things that come from the big industries, they work extremely well. You can even count on like when they go away, but it's a slippery slope for your body and for your chemistry and for your organs, from your kidney and your liver to go through, because it's not worth it having to wait for a new organ 10 years later, after you relieved your anxiety, because then it's already too late. So you have to substitute right now, even if you're on it only for half an hour or so. And I'm talking about teenagers, I'm talking about people that were diagnosed with specifically American diseases that don't really exist in other countries, that are more for,
What are you talking about? Can you be specific?
Well, the person that termed or coined the term, ADHD, on his deathbed, sort of stated that it was all a little made up on his side, because the clinical studies that he did were not done correctly. And there are countries out there that don't have problems with ADHD, that don't have a single, count of ADHD. Specifically in children here, in this country, it has more to do with, parents being present, parents being educating parents, and being there and having time for their children. Because if there's any sort of thing, I'm not saying that it might not exist at all, symptoms like this, but I have encountered a lot of kids in my profession that I help them out with plant extracts on a daily basis, microdosing a few drops, under your tongue, or giving them nootropic compounds for the brain, to help them with mental acuity and
focus.
And focus. And 100% of the people that I helped had to, eliminated everything that they were on before. And it's sort of not surprising to me, because I know that the average MD in their 8 years of med school, they have about 45 minutes of nutritional training.
That's right.
30 seconds to diagnose you, and they interrupt you every 10 seconds. And they haven't learned on what I know about the human body. I'm not a practitioner. I am a consultant. You can call it health and wellness coach if you want to, just to stay in some sort of a area, because I couldn't really tell people what I do for a living. Maybe formulator is the best sort of the term to coin, but it's a difficult process to describe what I really do, because sometimes I just diagnose and spiderweb things, and I can tell people what is exactly wrong with them, chemistry-wise and nutrition-wise, because a lot of people from Europe, 88% most of the time, they complain about developing allergies, or having sort of digestive problems and inflammatory problems and what sort. But what they don't normally tell the average doctor is that, I stopped eating bread or milk products when I moved to this country, which is probably the most important thing to mention, because the entire microbiome got turned around when this exactly happened, and all these problems started right there. And it's all about the connection between corticotropin releasing factors and the microbiome and the bacteria talking to the brain, right? And that's the second brain that we have. So we have literally 4 immune systems, not 2. The average doctor out there still learns stuff that's 120 years old, and that to me is mind-boggling, because we can have so much better diagnoses and elimination of illnesses if you just did a better job of educating in the first place. Instead of getting rid of home ed or cooking here in this country, you should implement a nutritional class in school and say, like, this is how you need to eat for the rest of your life to be healthy. We're in the 21st century now. And we have gotten a lot more medicinal knowledge,
Well, there's certainly more, absolutely. I mean, having said that, we have now many more integrative medicine practitioners, and there is absolutely a trend towards that, and the trend toward plant medicine and herbal remedies and that sort of thing. There has been a lot more education.
That's why I love the public speaking
available,
because all these talks that we're doing right now is attended by MDs and PhDs, and they have no idea what I talk about, and that's kind of sad to say, like, wow, the education that I had also, it was a little different in Europe. than it is here because you take longer in order to study over there. Plus, you have superior research there, and here you have a very short amount of time. And obviously, people know a lot about anatomy, they know a lot about medications, but they don't really know a lot about curing or healing.
What do you feel is so you're saying that despite the rise of integrative medicine and despite a better understanding of alternative modalities instead of just allopathic medicine, that there is still a long way to go. What do you feel, aside from education, which you're saying obviously should start at a younger age and also within the medical community, as part of the training for physicians? What else do you feel is the biggest hurdle for people, especially now, especially in the era of pandemics? What is the key to health and wellness?
Well, you have to be healthy every day. Obviously, a lot of people that are living in the country are still healthy, but there's also a very, very large conglomeration of pseudoscience that exists in big metropolitan cities, right? Nutrition and biochemistry is something that I would love to know more people about, because if you live in specific neighborhoods too, you see the very big difference in education, not only when it comes to general knowledge, but when it comes to specifically in taking care of your own body. And you go to a supermarket and you see, there's a family with food stamps, and they're $370 on 3 big shopping carts. But they're not filled with vegetables. They're not filled with anything that's healthy. They're filled with literally fat, salt, and sugar. And this is your brain obviously telling you that you can control the balance in your body, because that is 11 times more addictive to your brain than heroin. And that's a fact. So what you see out there is people spending money on things, and even the healthcare here is something that is just never going to catch up if we're not changing our pattern of being healthy every single day. A cleanse a week doesn't cut it, and going to a hospital for a week doesn't cut it, or getting injections or vitamin injections into your body doesn't cut it. You have to absorb these things from fresh food and ingredients so your body can activate them.
Absolutely.
That takes time. And when people say
good habits and building good habits.
So when people say, oh, I'm going to squeeze a little bit of health into my work schedule, or I can squeeze a little bit of sleep into my work schedule, this is the 2 worst things that you can actually do, because sleep is essential to life. Einstein slept for 10 hours a day, and there's a reason for that, because if you need to regenerate not only your brain but your skin, your bones, your eyesight, you need to sleep. And in order to do that, you need to be healthy. And everything comes from your digestion, and everything comes with, it immediately is a mirror of your psyche and your mental health. And this is why so many people go to the doctor in the first place, because they feel, crappy, they complain, they're anxious, they're frustrated, they're perspectiveless. And everything, believe it or not, stems from a lack of discipline to be healthy. And there's an urge to do things that you see on television, and parties are fun, and alcohol is fun, and drugs are fun. I totally agree with you, but it's also not a lifestyle to do for the rest of your life. You can do that when you're young. And later on, I always tell people, take time to be healthy now, because later on you have to find time to be sick if you don't do that, and it's so true, because I see a lot of regrets out there, and I've spent a lot of time with terminal ill people, and most of them have illnesses that could have been prevented, And this is something that is very, very important for me, because I don't know where it comes from. Maybe it's the cosmic consciousness that's still from the microwave background radiation that we have before the Big Bang. But it's something in me that says, like, I really want everybody to be healthy, and people tell me, are you crazy? That's never going to happen. Might be true, but, if you look at the food science in the last 40, 50 years, what the big conglomerates have created in the last 40 years, from launching a product that's like a soda, that's caramel flavored with a little vanilla and orange, and it's carbonated. It used to have a functional ingredient, and now it doesn't have it anymore. So the functionality is gone. But what these companies did with our people is sort of like being in a Wall-E movie where you see them now floating on floating chairs, just pushing buttons, and we're all like this.
Right, massive,
Yeah,
right, overweight, obese.
this is going to be like this in about 10 years, and it's not going to be fast. But if these big food and beverage companies have achieved this in 40 years, I think you and I and a lot of other amazing people that are joining our cause of creating a higher and better consciousness and better respect towards this planet and the universe is sort of like to teach and most importantly create a product that can reverse the damage that is sort of done without having the same effort and energy going into this and just a better energy and a cleaner energy by creating an offering that can reverse a lot of bad thinking out there. Because if you see what food and beverage has done with the supermarket, for instance, there's no market anymore. You have 270,000 products and they're designed by 4 companies only. So that is what I have a problem.
And most people don't realize that.
And most people don't realize that because they have different packaging. One is blue, the other one's green, the other one, has the word natural on top of it. It's all about selling things. And there's no harm in that unless you have a very good mission statement. And most of these companies don't have a good mission statement anymore besides let's make some money. And I'm not that sort of a guy that promotes diabetes 2 for teenagers because instead of putting 8 grams of sugar in our soda, now we have to put 79 grams of sugar in our soda. It's not really the solution when it comes to creative R&D in beverage, if you know what I mean. So that is something that ticked me off a little bit when it comes to the food science industry out there. And these are the guys who sponsor the Super Bowls and Olympic Games.
Well, do you see that changing though, given the propensity towards organic food and all the health trends right now?
People are waking up because now, specifically during a pandemic, everybody's scared that their body might not cut it, right? Everybody's sort of like, oh my God, I used to be an alcoholic. Oh my God, I used to smoke cigarettes every single day. And, I had a very bad habit, snorting things up my nose or injecting it into my arms. But it doesn't really matter what you've really done before. It matters what you do today and what the rest of your life sort of looks like. You can change any change things around. And that's not just a bumper sticker. That's actually quite true because I've done it, 6-7 times in my entire life. Only after surviving things that should have put me in the grave. And I'm still here. And the only reason I'm still here is because I had a very short list of very good friends, including yourself, and also a healthy mind after all these crazy things that told me you don't have the right to check out yet because there's a lot more people that would like you to be alive because I do have a certain skill I understand. And I also have responsibility towards the ones that sort of come after me, family and friends included. So I still have more work to do here. And I think now I'm sort of at almost the height of what is possible. And it doesn't take much, a little percentage of people that can, influence certain things. And I don't like to call them influencers. I just like to call them, fellow earthlings or humanists. But it's time for us to realize that we are all connected and literally all connected chemically speaking, because whatever we inhale and exhale, other people inhale and exhale, make it part of their body. And, that's how it's been done forever and ever. And even quantum physics, tells us that we can borrow a little energy from nowhere and then give it back right away. And make things appear out of nowhere. And I believe that is extremely possible if you give people a little hint in the form of a plant-based offering to basically restart the entire system and recalibrate their act of thinking a little more, specifically to respect other living organisms and themselves most of all.
Let me be the first to say that thank goodness you're with us, of course, now, and knowing what you've gone through, what incredible courage and spirit that you have, and you're a gift to the planet, honestly, Alex, and we're just so glad. so blessed that you're with us. And, you mentioned something earlier. We talked a lot about connection and interconnectivity and um, the mind and the body. And then there's love, there's the heart as well. And two questions I have for you. I know things shifted a lot after you had your own family, and you have a little daughter.
Mm.
And how has that shifted for you in terms of, um, you've always had a big heart, but how has that sort of balanced you out? Or has it?
It has balanced, but there's also I'm not going to call it fear. I'm call it a sort of excitement. But I know it will turn into exaltation and epiphanies later on, because what having another family member, is a precious thing for not only legacy, but I didn't really think about legacy as much as I thought about the experience of becoming a father, because people that I have spoken to seem to have given you less respect if you don't have family. And I understand now, I could understand how much they play a big role in interacting with other people when they talk about experiences. But I was never that sort of guy that, said like, I'm going to have two children and, become a soccer dad and do things in my garage and whatnot. My garage is my living room. And I did play soccer, but I think it's more the ocean that does it for me. But the child, her name is Hannah, she has taught me to become a real man, actually, a responsible human being, not like a flirtatious bartender kind of guy that was out there and trying to self-promote. Everybody sort of self-promotes at some point, but I've let things become calmer, and I learned more about not only what can happen in the first year of living, what can happen to your brain and to your heart and to your communication skills, but it makes you relive your childhood all over again. And that brings you not only extreme joy, but you also have this extreme protectiveness that you have embedded now into your spine and cat-like reflexes. So you become younger, actually. And I look younger from if you saw me 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you do.
I am healthier because not only because I stopped drinking, but I became a father. And first, there was a lack of sleep for 8 months straight, which I didn't think I could survive. But I think nothing that is related with this came with any negativity, period. Even the worries that you have of what might happen, later on in school, or what happens after this pandemic, and where would she go to school, and the fact that we're teaching her 3 different languages right now kind of makes me happy, because it's a very important part in life to communicate with other cultures and other people. And the more languages you speak, the more people you can talk to. But nowadays, obviously, these apps exist that you can translate anything almost live if you talk to someone through your phone. But it's a different thing if you can think in 3 different languages.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, your partner is Japanese. So Hannah is learning English, Japanese, and German, which is excellent.
It's a more complicated relationship, tricontinental. All of our families are all across the globe, so that makes it even more complicated. And up to this point, my daughter is now 2 years old in 2 months. She has never met my family before, and that's something that is still bugging me a little bit, because that's the next thing we need to do ASAP, is to introduce the new one that's going to run the family.
Already is.
Hopefully she'll pick up some of daddy's traits. Every morning she waters the plants and sprays them with me, and she picks leaves and she smells them, and she cooks with me, and she cuts things with me, and she is very, for her age, she's very enthused in botany already, which is a great thing, because it's not that I want to push her somewhere into a certain direction or make her a carbon copy of myself without the flaws. This is not, why you become a parent. This is becoming a parent is magical, and it doesn't seem like it anymore when I look at other, families and the way they interact and fight with each other. And, everybody has problems, and family is probably, most diverse combination of crazy human beings, ever. And like everybody can probably say that about their families, but nobody ever talks about these things and how things came to be. But I think that the bigger the family, the better it is now. It's great to have family, it's great to have friends, but becoming a father is something that is magic. And every single day you realize that what your parents tell you about, like, enjoy this specific time, never it's going to come back. And it's super true. I wish she was still 6 months old or so. And now she's, 22 months. And she can speak 3 languages. She can, jump on a trampoline. She can plant plants. And soon she's going to be over here, helping me with things. Makes me happy. But it's all in the moment, always, because I know what can happen the next day, and I know what, you have to be prepared for things that come in life. And since it's all one big circle of life, this was also part of a very negative year 2 years ago, where my father passed away, who was like my personal hero. And that changed me a lot too. And it made me more grown up. I never thought I would hold my old man's dying hand, saw his last breath. So that was something that was very, very unique for me. And I thought that I would never have to go through this, but things make you stronger, and you get more mature by the more losses that you have in life. And it also hurts a little more in here, but it's one thing that, the pain that's left behind is actually a good pain now, because we feel very fortunate to have had that pain in the first place. And that's how I think about,
Well, you can't have that unless you have love, right? You're not going to feel the pain unless you have the other side.
I know there was a time where, I myself hated myself at some points in time, where I was ready to make some foolish decisions. Now I'm at this point where the energy is at, the max right now.
What would you say to a lot of people now who are obviously going through a lot of hardship, and what are some tips and what's some advice that you could give them in terms of maintaining their immune system? The point you made earlier is very true. I think people who were relying or maybe thought of health as sort of a once in a while I'll do a cleanse, or once in a while I'll maybe stop drinking for a month or something like that. And that's changed a lot because of what's happened in the last year, and the realization of how important it is to maintain one's terrain, which is one's body and one's system. And that's not a one-shot deal. It takes time. It took years for us to get to this point, for people to get liver disease or heart disease. And it's going to take time and patience for them to, rebuild their systems and to strengthen them and to really come back into full health and building up their immune systems. What would you suggest for people to do?
It's a good question. Yesterday I was browsing through Instagram, the home site, and I saw what people are doing nowadays, because everybody wants to sell health, right? And unlike me, who's not really profiting from the inventions that I do, it's basically I relay information that is ancient, right? And I connect it in points where people wouldn't, connect it with. Just as the average MD doesn't connect disease to be connected directly to your second brain down there. And that is something that I always tell people, to not just get hung up on one ingredient, when they say, well, celery juice is good. Yeah, it is good for you, it is great. But, you can't drink 2 gallons of celery juice a day and just think that, this is going to do it for me. Everything has to be done in moderation. You have to know how much to use for your body. You have to educate yourself and do your own research when you say, like, oh, so far I'm on medications. Am I even allowed to take this ingredient? So that's where it already starts, because everybody's different. But there are universal things that I would recommend to stay healthy, even specifically during a pandemic. First of all, know that it's fact that we have 4 different, box systems that will help us stay healthy and defend us from, pathogens that are out there. And we are getting hit by pathogens every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Used to 1,000 new viruses every single day, believe it or not.
Well, not just that, the pathogens, well, there's that, and then there's also the contamination and pollution that we're exposed to environmentally.
Yes, there's protozoa, there's anything, there's bad stuff out there, there's good stuff out there. A lot of people don't realize that, we need bacteria on our skin. We need bacteria in our lungs. We need bacteria in our intestines to protect us.
Absolutely.
So, people treat this specific time that we're in like this was something very special, which is not really, very special. We encounter things every single day, and the more we're used to bacteria and germs, the better they can help us, because they communicate with each other.
And well, we evolved with viruses and bacteria. That's actually part of our
more bacterial than we are human
cells. Yes, exactly.
We have about 37 trillion human cells in our body. And for every one of those, we have 1.44 in one. So we have over 100 trillion bacterial cells in our body, which makes us more bacterium than human. And these bacteria, they exchange chemicals with us on a molecular level. And not only chemicals, but also vibrations and frequencies. And the foods that you eat also have vibrations and frequencies. And you have different microbiomes all over the world. If you look at Sweden and you look at Russia, they eat the same things, a lot of fish, a lot of potatoes, and such, a lot of fats and oils. And then you see America, who have 89% of a bacteria that is actually too bad for you in their gut, and that's called C30. So when you have and go out to, put probiotics in your body, do it in a fashion that you can actually get the right probiotics for you, something that your family grew up with, something that, your heritage grew up with. And that's why culture and food is so important for us, because that's basically our microbiome and our health that we inherit. Because the first 3 years of our life, our microbiome is set for life in the first 3 years of our life. And that's a fact. On our skin, in our lungs, and in our intestines. We have 4 immune systems. We have the innate immune system, which is, the mouth and the eyes and the throat. And then we have the adaptive immune system, and everybody learns about that in biology. But what people don't really learn about anymore, specifically MDs or med students, is the central nervous system. It's the actual, biochemistry, and it's the second brain, which is our gut biome. And that is a fact. And for the last 20 years, we've been knowing that. And there's more and more papers come out. And last week, to, not to my surprise, but to everybody else's surprise, is sort of like this I told you so moment when, scientists found out that our microbiome is directly linked with the severity of the coronavirus symptoms. And that is something to me, yes, that's why this country is so screwed, because everybody here is unhealthy. You have fast food and more delivery. Nobody cooks. Nobody knows what to eat anymore, because, there's this demonization of ingredients. Don't eat sugar, don't eat milk, don't do this. People don't know how, what to believe anymore. All you need to do is believe your grandmother, believe it or not. Exactly knew how to keep yourself healthy with fresh ingredients. They knew how to make you a chicken soup that can cure your flu. So like these are the things that do make sense if you put them or take them apart and explode them into sort of like the biochemical view, because these ingredients, they've been used for 5,000-6,000 years. They're used today, and they're going to be used in 10,000 years. And there's not going to be a pill that can make you better overnight. There's not a pill that can, make you not afraid anymore overnight. You have to work on this yourself. You have to be committed to it, because again, if you don't take time to be healthy now, you have to find time to be sick later.
Right. And food as medicine, and using food as medicine, and understanding that what you put into your body is you.
Yeah, you don't want to spend the 10 years of your, last life in a hospital bed where, every sort of like relative is around you is crying and saying like, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. This is one thing. So in order to stay healthy, you have to be healthy every day. Even if you, break the rule once in a while and you get roaring drunk or you take some drugs or whatever, your body is a very resilient organism that can regenerate very fast, specifically the lungs. The only thing I can tell people during this pandemic what not to do is to smoke, to drink alcohol, and basically to go outside, take a walk, take your family with you, breathe some fresh air and some phytoncides in the woods. There's a reason why spas are all in the forest. So that is something that is fact. We need exercise. Okay, a lot of people,
and be in nature, as much as you can.
they're watching, television. They're not being creative. They're not, focusing on anything. And then they hear these symptoms. Of course, you don't have any vitamin D. You don't have any sunlight. You don't have anything going on. So whatever I tell you now is what doctors told you 100 years ago. Go outside, take a walk. That's where it starts. And it'll make you a lot happier. But for everyday sort of immune boost, I myself take 85 supplements. I can't expect that from everybody to do, but sort of can, because you can get these supplements from food. And by supplements, I'm not talking about capsules. I'm not talking about pills or droppers or anything fancy. I'm talking about just healthy food. A third of our food should be fermented, from bread to chocolate to kimchi to whatever. That's a very, good thing for your body because it contains bacteria that are good for your gut and good for your health. But overall, vitamin A, vitamin D, zinc, ionic zinc, liquid, if you have it. And then obviously some mushroom supplements too. Reishi mushrooms is really, really good for immunity. And on a daily basis, I take cordyceps just in order to prevent cancerous cells. And if you have it, you can be sure that it won't spread to any other part of your body. So cordyceps every day. And then Schisandra and Goji I take for respiratory things. And this is pretty much an everyday routine. No matter what, you have to do it, even if it takes half an hour, okay? Because you have to put your health in front of everything else.
Do you consider yourself a healer aside from a scientist and humanist?
Yes, I do.
Because you are.
Yeah. I thought you were going to ask me what my favorite books were today, But
well, what are your favorite books?
Well, I have a few next to me here, but this is the first one here.
Light and Shaping Life, Biophotons in Biology and Medicine by, who's the author?
The author is John Ackerman. Brilliant. Something that I started reading after my father passed away, because there's a lot of people who cure cancers with frequencies and biophotons, which again works. The second book just became one of my favorites. It won an award, a science award too. It's by Pollack, and it's called The Fourth Phase of Water. And
The Fourth Phase of Water, Beyond Solid Liquid Vapor.
No.
By Gerald H. Pollack.
And this is one of the most scientific and fascinating books you'll ever read about water, because it's about everything. That water is different in a glass than it is into your cell. It responds differently, and the fourth phase won't surprise you either what shape that would have. Hint, hint.
Yes, intent changes
project, because it's
the structure of water.
Phase that is very complicated to explain, but fascinating read. Then the third book I just read, I got from another client, which is called The Witch Doctor's Apprentice.
Witch Doctor's Apprentice by Nicole Maxwell.
Yes, Nicole Maxwell. She used to be hunting for medicinal parts in the Amazon, and the introduction is by Terence McKenna. But it's
fantastic.
Really amazing book about plants that you haven't heard of yet that can cure the world. And then last but not least, I also have to think about the little ones.
Organic Chemistry for Babies. Love it. Orgo for babies.
With, this is the ball. And there's another ball.
It's never too early. It's never too early to start with your kids.
All the way to what all these balls can do, and, what molecules they have, and then later on, what they make up.
Very cool.
Vanilla to whatever. So it's it's a really cool book for kids.
Yeah, especially now. I mean, after this whole year, and I'm so glad we're finally coming back to the science, because these are facts, and we have to be a little bit more aware and educated on all of it. And are you still doing personal consultations at this point?
Yes, I am. If someone has any issues, if someone has any loved ones, if someone has to find a different route and an alternative in between specific therapies, they can find me. I will help them. I will interview them. I will send them a questionnaire, and then I will get in touch with that person for an hour. We'll talk, and after that, lives will change. But yeah, people can do this. People can also hire me to do formulations on their own. They can hire me for speeches, for school, public speaking, anything you like, in order to spread the wisdom of the interconnectedness, chemistry, biochem, scent and flavor, which is our oldest sense, is the scent. Obviously, that we specialize a lot in when we create products as well. So that's
the best way to find you on Instagram.
Instagram is where I release a lot of creative passion out there. I post a lot about what we do, and I have little tiny mini stories there.
People can DM you there.
Yes, I also have a website coming up soon. It's called Observable Benefits. And
fantastic.
That would be something that is more company related when it comes to product developments, creating offerings, and doing research, but also specializing in all science, health related, including young people as well. So it's independent of age or gender. It is all to do with just us being us, and that there's more to us than just flesh and blood and prescription pads. Alex Ott Science, all one word, on Instagram.
Thank you so much, Alex, for your time, for being on the show.
It's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Such an honor, and thank you for this extraordinary information and knowledge and sharing your wisdom.